What if rushing to apply scripture is actually what is preventing us from understanding it? That question completely changed how I read the Bible. In this video, I'm going to be sharing 3 ways rushing to apply scripture shaped my faith and what changed when understanding came first. The first way is that it trained me to read for answers and not understanding. Now, when I was growing up and I was opening up the word, honestly, I didn't even know what I was looking for. All I knew was I would open it up and I would go, okay, well, show me what is it that you are going to tell me today, Lord, And so I would typically stay within the confinement of whatever I was being taught at church. And then I would go home. And even when I would read it, and I would take my notes, there was always some form of disconnect. Like there was no way for me to know how to just keep reading it again. And then at that point, it just seemed like, well, I go on Sundays, that should be sufficient enough, once a week, technically I'm reading it with everyone. So I didn't really feel it necessary for me to read on my own. But if I did actually take the time to read, then what would happen is I would look for myself in whatever character that I was reading. Like right now I'm in Exodus. So I would be looking at, Moses and going okay, well, how am I in as Moses in my life, and how does that apply to my day to day and give me that encouragement to keep moving forward, and that is literally how I would read it. It would be successful. I guess that would be considered to be a very successful read. And I was faithful in my Bible study because I opened it up and I read it, and that would be confirming to me my faith is working, because I felt that God was talking to me through the text. And I mean, clearly what it did was it created pressure that scripture wasn't asking for. I was literally putting more pressure on the scripture, which just caused me to be stressed, and the words of my Bible were not really being read because I honestly didn't understand what I was doing. When I was constantly looking for myself and looking for that application during my Bible reading, it became stressful. It wasn't a space of joy and excitement. Oh, I'm going to read my Bible today. It was we'll see. Well, maybe if I have time, and it was because I didn't want to feel that anxiousness and that pressure of oh, I'm going to read today, And so obviously I didn't really feel excited about reading. When I didn't know what to do with a passage right away, it frustrated me, and it also reminded me of how much more I needed to lean on, my pastor or, whoever that had understanding of the scripture, because I felt that, God speaks to them. He doesn't necessarily speak to me, and so I became more of a drawn pressure for me to, stay closer to them, because they're the one that's going to be my source of knowledge and information in the scripture, instead of me actually being able to sit down and get to know the word for myself. So it ended up being kind of stressful. And usually, typically when it's a stressful thing, you don't really want to do it, then look, I just don't do it. So understanding first changed what obedience looked like for me. Now, when I'm deciding to sit down and go, okay, I am going to sit to understand versus look for myself in the scripture, it caused me to have purpose. I wasn't going in looking for myself, which a lot of times we're always looking for ourselves, right? What is my purpose? What does God call me to do? What is, we have all these questions about life, what college I go to, who should I marry, or what should I make for dinner? And so looking for that in the word was complicated. So now that I'm deciding to go, I'm going to look for understanding first, it relieved all of that pressure, because it was okay, it's not about me. I don't have to really perform or have to go digging and searching for something. All I have to do is just understand. And so now I am coming to understand what the scripture says. That gave me that desire to actually want to sit down. I'm okay, because it's not about me. So now once that pressure was gone, I've looked forward to actually wanting to sit down. It's not about me. So now I'm looking for him. And every time I sit down, I am understanding something new about God's character, about who he is as the main character of the Bible. And so now I am now drawn to wanting to know more. And that has sparked that excitement to want to read the Bible. So let's look at Philippians 4 and 13, because this particular scripture meant something completely different for me than what it actually means in context. So I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Okay. So when I took this scripture, just pulling it right out of the Bible right there, how I would apply it, I took it as it being that I need to do more, that I can do more, I should do more. So that meant hustle culture, that I need to show up, that I need to be present, that I need to do all the things, and that is what we're called to do, because we've got the strength in the back of God behind us, right? And so what that caused was not the strength to keep pushing forward. It caused so much pressure. It caused so much pressure to show up. And so that meant that if I was tired, then that meant that I wasn't being a faithful Christian. If I was behind, then that means that I was not being faithful in what God had called me to do, because I was behind and things weren't going as they should, because I can do all things through Christ. So then that means that, he's perfect and he can, and he can push behind me. So that means that I should be able to do all of these things. So much pressure. But when we look at what Paul actually says and we read further before that particular scripture, it speaks to him saying content. It speaks about contentment. Being content whether you have plenty or you lack. Whether you are good and things are good or things are not. To be content because you can do all things through Christ that strengthens you. That gives so much more richness to that scripture. And it literally removes all of that stress and that pressure, because we're looking at it the way that God had intended it to be. And this is just the start of the conversation, because once I dealt with the fact that I was actually rushing to apply scripture, I had to deal with a whole nother thing, what I was taught in the first place. So in this next video, I actually talk about what I was taught and how I overcame it. And that changed everything.